Hey guys, I'm Salvation again, and this is the second part of my Know Your Loot series, and this time I want to talk about physical and elemental attack daggers. Before we talk about the specifics of the daggers and the mods you want on the dagger, let me get this straight. Elemental and physical attack daggers are completely different. As a physical attack build, you don't care about the elemental DPS at all, and as an elemental build, you maybe care a little bit about the physical DPS because it can be used for additional leech and stuff like that, but for the most part you only care about the attack speed, the crit chance and the elemental DPS. So it's two completely different builds that need completely different daggers for the most part. There is one thing that every attack dagger will need, and that is local critical strike chance. The base local critical strike chance on daggers ranges from 6% to 7% base, and don't be fooled about it being only 1% difference. The base critical strike chance on a weapon is a big deal, because the multiplier on the weapon will get applied to that, and then all the multipliers from the tree use this as the base. So having a high base critical strike chance is really important to get up your critical strike chance. Without a roll that increases the critical strike chance of the dagger, a dagger won't be worth much. No one wants a dagger without a crit roll, because a dagger is a crit weapon, and a crit weapon without crit is not worth much, period. If you find a good dagger that has like great physical damage rolls or great elemental rolls, you might want to check if you can at least craft the critical strike chance on it, because it will almost always be the best craft you can do on the dagger if it does not have that mod already. The best possible roll for critical strike chance is 35 to 38% increased critical strike chance. So that is what you want to aim for, and the crafted one is 22 to 27%. It's still good enough, and certainly can make a very good dagger. It's not like it would be worthless because it has some percent less, but it certainly contributes a lot to the value of a dagger if it has a really high crit chance. So now let's talk about physical daggers. What do you want on a physical dagger? You want percent increased physical damage, maybe also in the hybrid mod increased physical damage and plus accuracy rating. Then you want flat physical damage, and even if you find a dagger with a really high percent physical damage but with no flat physical damage, it won't be worth all that much, because you really need the two mods to make a great weapon. If you only have the flat physical damage, as in adds like 10 to 20 physical damage, and a crappy increased physical damage percent roll, it won't be a high DPS, and same way the other way around. Even if you get the top roll of like 169% increased physical damage, and you don't have place on the dagger to craft a flat physical damage, you won't ever get a good weapon out of this. So keep that in mind. You need a combination of mods to make it good. Then the next thing is, as I said, the crit chance. We already talked about that. And as with most weapons, you also want attack speed. It contributes a lot to the overall DPS of the weapon, and if you find a weapon with good physical rolls and also already good critical strike chance, you might want to craft the attack speed to raise the DPS and make it show up higher on the PoE trade listing. The last suffix you want on a physical attack dagger is then again the critical strike multiplier. We already talked about that in the caster dagger video. You want the critical strike multiplier on your weapon because there are not many slots where you can get it, and it's a really good DPS stat. So if we recap that, we will see that physical daggers are pretty straightforward. You want your prefixes to be flat physical damage, increased physical damage, and maybe also a hybrid roll of increased physical damage and accuracy rating. Then you want your suffixes to be increased critical strike chance, increased attack speed, and increased global critical strike multiplier. And that's it. And to be perfectly honest, there are not even any optional mods that would be kind of fancy or something like that. You really want this set of mods, and of course your dagger can still be good if it has a low roll of one of them, or is missing the critical strike multiplier, or missing the attack speed. It can still be good, but there are not like any special mods that that would be optional. Like no one wants life gained on kill or mana gained on kill on his dagger. So yeah, they can be there and it can still be a good dagger, but it's nothing you would especially look out for. As with the caster daggers, there is also a unique that every rare physical dagger needs to compare to, and for the physical daggers, that is a Bino's kitchen knife. So let's have a look at a Bino's kitchen knife to find out what mods a rare dagger needs to be better than a Bino's kitchen knife. Because if it's not better than a Bino's kitchen knife, you most likely won't sell it or won't want to use it yourself, because a Bino's isn't really expensive. It was expensive in the past, but since the last leaks, a Bino's kitchen knife is really not expensive anymore, and so that's a really hard baseline for a rare dagger to meet to be even worth considering. As you can see, a Bino's kitchen knife has a really good critical strike chance and goes up to 9.9% critical strike chance, and that is really hard to beat for a rare dagger. But as I said, it's not a big deal if it's like a little lower, as long as your dagger brings other stuff to the table that a Bino's can't. But the most important part about a rare weapon is, for the most time, its DPS. You get the DPS by adding up the low-end physical damage with the high-end physical damage, dividing that by 2 and multiplying it by the attack speed of the weapon. For a Bino's kitchen knife, we get a DPS of 220 to like 240 physical DPS, and that is also really good. It's a hard baseline to beat for a rare dagger, and with Bino's being as cheap as it is, it can be really hard to find a good rare dagger that is better than a Bino's. It can also roll a critical strike multiplier. It can't roll as high as a rare dagger could, but it has a pretty solid 25 critical strike multiplier, and that's also a factor you should consider. One thing a Bino's does not have, or at least is not very good at, is the attack speed. A Bino's is pretty slow with its 1.4 base attack speed and no modifier on it. So that's definitely a category where a rare dagger can easily beat a Bino's kitchen knife. So yeah, to evaluate your rare dagger, compare it to a Bino's kitchen knife, see what it does better, see what a Bino's can do better, and you can make up a price from that. So what are the good bases for a physical attack dagger? I already talked about that in my last video a little bit. For a attack dagger, the base is a lot more important than it is for a caster dagger, because you need all the stats on it, not just the implicit as a caster dagger. So the best DPS is indeed a Exile. That is the new base, and I think that is a pretty solid choice. The crit chance is like the middle ground between the other bases, a bit higher than the fast bases and a little lower than the really slow bases like the Demon Dagger or the Chris family. Then the DPS is pretty good, the base DPS. At least it's the best base DPS you have, but the APS, the attacks per second, are only a middle ground. Again, it's 1.3 APS, so yeah, you will need a really high attack speed mod on that dagger to make it great. The most commonly used base is an ambusher. It has a low critical strike chance, but it has the highest base attack speed, and that makes it really good, because the attack speed is a big deal for everyone that is using an attack. Then there's also the special case of the Flicker Strike dagger, and you want to use a Demon Dagger for that, because a Demon Dagger has the highest average per hit damage. It is really slow with 1.2 attacks per second, but the attack speed isn't all that important for Flicker Strike. It's much more important to get really big single hits. So if you want to craft a physical dagger, I would consider using an ambusher or a sai. And when you pick up stuff from the ground, I would maybe also consider a Azomite dagger. That is pretty comparable to an ambusher. It's a bit slower, hits a bit harder per hit, and has a bit better critical strike chance, so that might be also a very viable base. And the Imperial Skein is also a good contender. It has roughly the same DPS, just a very tiny bit less attack speed and more critical strike chance than an ambusher. So yeah, Imperial Skeins, Slaughter Knives, Ambushers, Azomite Daggers, Zeiss should be picked up if you're looking for a good physical dagger. There is also another special case, and that is the Crown of Ice attack dagger. Crown of Ice is a unique that makes spell damage applied to attacks. And some people want to use that with a physical dagger. I think it's more commonly used if you are doing elemental builds to get additional elemental scaling, but a physical dagger with good physical DPS and an additional spell damage roll might sell to someone who wants to do a Crown of Ice build with physical daggers. So that is additional point of value that you can get out of a dagger. Spell damage on a physical dagger isn't completely useless. It can make it a pretty special dagger for use with Crown of Ice. Honestly, this video got quite a bit longer than I expected, and because of that I will split it again and talk about elemental daggers in the next video I will be doing. I will continue this series with daggers, and once I got that covered I will expand to other bases that might be interesting to talk about. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to like and subscribe, it helps me a lot.